Well, Eugene, you are covering Eurasia in Stratfor, and to start our conversation, my first question about how do you assess, how you view the major trends in Eurasia, especially bearing in mind this, well, conflict or turmoil in international relations between West and East. What would you see as the main trends?
Right. Well, from my perspective and from the perspective of Stratfor, in Eurasia, the primary focal point of the region is the standoff between Russia and the West, which itself encompasses a lot of different things, but primarily it's the competition, the geopolitical competition between Moscow and the US especially, but also Europe, that we've seen play out and really intensify in the past few years ever since the Ukrainian crisis, the Euromaidan uprising. So we've seen that play out in a number of different ways, whether that's the sanctions that the US and the EU have passed on Russia, the economic isolation of Russia and the political isolation as well. We also see military buildups happening on both sides, both in Russia, but also along the borderlands of NATO in Eastern Europe, with Belarus being a key part of that as well. So this is really the key heart of this is really the key issue of Eurasia is this competition between Russia and the West over the surrounding countries.
Well, and you also analyzed and analyzing the sanctions war between Russia and the West in general and the United States in particular. How do you view the outcomes? To what extent the sanctions, United States sanctions, influence Russia and Russian politics, both domestic and international?
Right. Well, the sanctions have certainly had quite an impact on Russia in terms of hurting its economy. We've seen the Russian economy basically be weak ever since the sanctions started, although that did also coincide with the drop in oil prices, which is really the big thing that's been hurting Russia these years. And to this extent, we've seen Russia try to basically find different economic partners now that ties with... The US was never a big economic partner for Russia, but European countries were. But if you really look at it, the point of the sanctions from the higher level is to shape Russian behavior, particularly in conflict areas like Ukraine. And that has not succeeded in terms of making Russia more cooperative in this theater. And if anything, actually Russia has become even more assertive and getting involved in areas like Syria, to a lesser extent what Russia has built up in terms of its relationship with countries like Iran, North Korea. These are all things that Russia is using as leverage to try to offset the bad relationship with the West. So the sanctions have shaped Russian behavior, but they haven't yet achieved their purpose of making Russia more cooperative and forcing Russia out of theaters like Ukraine.
But do you expect any prospects here of sanctions? And could this, if the sanctions would be harder and harsher against Russia, would it help or not?
Well, I think only in an extreme scenario if the US were to completely cut off the Russians from the global financial system or something along those lines, if it was really just going to completely create chaos on Russia, although that would have global implications as well. I think that that's the only way that the US can really force Russia to act. I mean, Russia, from its perspective, acts in a very defensive way geopolitically. It's trying to preserve its sphere of influence. And so Russia is willing to bear the economic pain because it's had the experience in the early post-Soviet period or the late Soviet period of trading geopolitical concessions for economic benefits. And it's seen that hasn't really worked out too well for Moscow. So I think from Russia's perspective, only if sanctions were to be very extreme would we actually see the kind of behavior that the US is looking for.